The rain fell on Manhattan with a cold, indifferent persistence, turning the streets of the Upper East Side into a slick, black mirror that reflected the city's hurried, fractured lights. Inside the bistro, however, the world was a different story. It was a bubble of warmth and muted gold, where the soft clinking of cutlery and the low hum of self-important conversations blended with the smooth notes of a jazz piano. Floor-to-ceiling windows served as a one-way mirror, allowing the patrons to observe the harsh reality outside without ever having to feel it. It was a place built on the illusion of separation, a carefully curated haven where the city's elite could dine on exquisitely prepared meals while the rest of the world, with its cold and its struggles, was kept at a safe, aesthetic distance, reduced to a mere moving picture behind the glass. At a small table set for two, Catherine Hayes sat alone, the very picture of Wall Street success. Her designer power suit was impeccably tailored, her jewelry understated and expensive, and not a single strand of hair was out of place. She was a woman who commanded multi-million-dollar deals with a cool, unshakable confidence. Yet here, she seemed almost translucent, a ghost haunting a life she had meticulously built. Her gaze was distant, her expression a blank mask of control that failed to hide the profound emptiness in her eyes. She listlessly swirled a deep red wine in her glass, watching the liquid cling to the crystal, a perfect metaphor for her own existence. Surrounded by richness, but consumed by a solitude so deep it had become her only true companion. On the other side of that glass, huddled in the unforgiving cold, was a reality Catherine had long since learned to ignore. A man, his face etched with the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep, stood protectively behind a battered shopping cart overflowing with their few worldly possessions. Tucked close to him were two small children. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 7, tried to look brave, his small shoulders squared against the wind. But it was the little girl who held the world in her eyes, perhaps 5 years old, with cheeks pink from the biting air. She clutched a tattered teddy bear to her chest and stared at the bistro's glowing lights, not with longing or envy, but with a pure, unadulterated sense of wonder, as if she were looking into a magical snow globe. It was then that their worlds collided. Catherine's vacant stare drifted from her wine and met the little girl's gaze through the rain-streaked window. The child, Mia, didn't flinch or look away. Instead, a simple, guileless smile bloomed on her face, a small offering of warmth in the cold night. That smile, so innocent and freely given from a place of such profound vulnerability, struck Catherine with the force of a physical blow. The carefully constructed dam she had built around her heart for years didn't just crack, it shattered. In that instant, the father's protective embrace and the child's innocent joy formed an inverted mirror to her own life, reflecting back not their poverty, but her own. The spreadsheets, the stock tickers, the empty accolades, it all dissolved into an overwhelming, unfamiliar urge to simply act. The walk back inside the bistro was a silent storm. The manager, a man whose smile was usually plastered on his face, now wore an expression of thinly veiled horror. Patrons turned in their seats, their whispers following Catherine and her guests like a cold draught. She ignored them all, her focus solely on the family she guided to her table. She ordered hot soup, grilled cheese for the children, and a steak for Michael, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the churning emotions inside her. As the food arrived, she watched, a silent observer to a scene of profound intimacy. Michael didn't touch his own plate. Instead, he carefully broke off a piece of bread, dipped it into his soup, and held it to Mia's lips, his calloused hands gentle. That simple, selfless act was the final blow to Catherine's carefully guarded heart. In that moment, she wasn't a Wall Street titan. She was just a woman witnessing the very definition of family, the one thing her sprawling apartment and 9-figure portfolio could never provide. The memory of her own past rose unbidden, a ghost at the table. She remembered the sterile white walls of fertility clinics, the hushed, sympathetic tones of doctors delivering bad news, and the slow, painful unraveling of her marriage under the weight of a dream that would never be. Her ex-husband had wanted children, and when it became clear she couldn't have them, the love they shared had withered into polite resentment. He had a new family now, a life filled with the sounds of laughter and tiny footsteps that she only saw in curated photos online. Her success had become a fortress she built to hide the emptiness within. But Michael's quiet love for his children had just breached its walls. Michael, for his part, was overwhelmed, his shame warring with his gratitude. He hadn't always been this man, defined by a shopping cart and worn-out shoes. Just a year ago, he was a construction foreman, proud of the sweat on his brow and the home he provided. But a layoff, a brutal and sudden casualty of a project's budget cuts, had sent their lives into a tailspin. His wife, unable to cope with the rapid descent from stability to uncertainty, had simply left one morning, a note on the kitchen counter, her only goodbye. He'd burned through their meager savings trying to keep the apartment, then his truck, then their dignity. Every door he knocked on for work slammed shut, leaving him with only two choices: surrender his children to the system or hold them close and face the storm together. He chose the storm. The children, Leo and Mia, knew a reality no child should. They knew which city greats blew the warmest air and which public libraries were the kindest about letting them stay to get out of the cold. Leo had learned to be a little man, his face a serious mask as he guarded their belongings, while his father searched for cans or scrap metal. Mia, however, still held on to the magic. For her, the city wasn't just a concrete maze of hardship. It was a place of endless lights, of strange and wonderful sounds, and of unexpected kindness, like the woman who now sat across from them, her eyes sad but warm. She clutched her teddy bear, its one remaining button eye staring blankly, and offered Catherine another small, hopeful smile, a silent thank you that spoke volumes more than words ever could. After the meal, the first real obstacle presented itself. Catherine couldn't just send them back out into the rain. She tried to book a room at a nearby hotel, but the moment she walked in with Michael and the children, the clerk's demeanor shifted. He looked them over, his gaze lingering on their damp, worn clothes, and suddenly there were no vacancies. It was a lie, polite and dismissive, but a wall nonetheless. She tried another, and then a third, each time met with the same thinly veiled prejudice. The city that celebrated her wealth and ambition was now showing her its other face, the one reserved for those who didn't fit the pristine image. It was infuriating, a bureaucratic coldness that was somehow more chilling than the rain outside. It's in these moments you see the truth of things, and it makes you wonder how many other stories of quiet struggle are dismissed every single day. If you believe these stories deserve a voice, subscribing helps us continue to bring them to light. Back in her heated luxury SUV, a temporary sanctuary from the judgment of the world, her phone buzzed incessantly. It was a colleague from the firm. "Catherine, what's this I'm hearing? Are you all right? People are talking," he said, his voice a cocktail of concern and condescension. Another message, this one from a friend. "Be careful. You don't know who these people are." The cynical, pragmatic world she belonged to was pulling her back, whispering doubts into her ear. Was this a mistake? Was she being a naive fool, an easy mark for a sob story? The part of her that negotiated ruthless deals, that trusted no one, began to surface, questioning the raw, unfiltered impulse that had driven her out into the rain. Her entire life had been built on calculated risks, not blind leaps of faith. She finally found a small, unassuming motel on the edge of the city, one that took her cash without asking questions. The room was sparse, smelling of disinfectant and stale cigarette smoke, but it was warm and dry. As she was about to leave them for the night, feeling the familiar pull of her solitary life, little Leo spoke for the first time. "Do you have any kids?" he asked, his voice small but clear, his eyes wide with a child's unfiltered curiosity. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Before Catherine could formulate an answer, Mia toddled over and pushed her tattered bear into Catherine's hands. "He'll keep you safe," she whispered. Holding the worn, one-eyed toy, Catherine felt another crack in her armor. It wasn't a transaction. It was a gift of trust, the most valuable currency of all. Driving back to her empty, silent apartment, the weight of her decision settled upon her. A motel room for a few nights. A few $100s. It was a band-aid on a gaping wound. She knew this wasn't a solution. What would happen when the money ran out? The system was designed to keep people like Michael trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. She could write a large check, of course, enough to sustain them for months. But then what? She would be a distant benefactor, and they would be dependent, their futures still uncertain. The sheer scale of the problem felt insurmountable, a towering wall of social and economic barriers that her wealth alone couldn't demolish. The feeling of helplessness was foreign to her. A woman used to solving any problem by either outthinking it or outspending it. It was in that moment of frustration, staring out at the city lights from her penthouse window, that the shift happened. The fear and doubt began to recede, replaced by a cold, familiar anger. Not at Michael, not at herself, but at the injustice of it all. She had spent her life building fortunes, moving capital, creating wealth from abstract numbers on a screen. Why couldn't she apply that same strategic mind to something that actually mattered? The answer was so clear, it was almost stunning in its simplicity. She wouldn't just give them money, she would give them a platform. She would use the most powerful tool in her arsenal, her ability to craft a compelling narrative, to mobilize resources, and to make people invest in a story. It was a daunting thought, to put a family's life out there for the world to see. But what other choice was there? Sometimes, to change a life, you have to do more than just feel compassion. You have to build a bridge. Your support by subscribing allows us to keep building these bridges, one story at a time. The next morning, she returned to the motel with coffee, donuts, and a proposal. She sat with Michael, the fluorescent lights of the small room casting long shadows, and explained her idea. She wanted to start a GoFundMe campaign to tell his story honestly and with dignity. She would write about his past as a hard-working foreman, about his wife leaving, and about his unwavering dedication to his children in the face of impossible odds. She wouldn't portray him as a victim, but as a father fighting a battle that anyone could lose. Michael listened, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. He was a proud man, and the thought of laying his life bare for the world to scrutinize was terrifying. The idea of accepting charity on such a public scale felt like a final surrender of his pride. "I don't want a handout," he said, his voice raspy with emotion. "I just want a chance to work, to get back on my feet." Catherine met his gaze, her own eyes steady and resolute. "This isn't a handout, Michael. This is a hand up," she explained, her voice soft but firm. "This is about telling the truth. The truth is that you're a good father who has been dealt a terrible hand. We're not asking for pity. We're asking for a community to invest in a family's future. We're going to show them your strength, not your struggle. Let me use my skills to help you, the same way you used yours to build things. Let me help you build a new beginning for Leo and Mia." She saw the hesitation in his eyes slowly give way to a flicker of hope, the first he had allowed himself to feel in a very long time. That night, Catherine didn't sleep. She sat at her sleek, minimalist desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face, and she wrote. She poured every ounce of her frustration, her empathy, and her newfound purpose into the words on the screen. She chose photos that captured not their poverty, but their love, a shot of Michael holding a sleeping Mia, another of Leo looking protectively at his sister. She set a goal of $85,000, a number she calculated would be enough for a security deposit on a modest apartment, a used van for Michael to start a small business, and a cushion to get them through the first few months. With a deep breath that felt more like a prayer, she clicked the publish button, sending their story out into the vast, anonymous expanse of the internet. Then she waited, the silence of her apartment amplifying the frantic beating of her own heart. The numbers on the screen climbed with a speed that felt both surreal and terrifying. First 10,000, then 30, then 50. Within 48 hours, the campaign blew past its goal, settling at a staggering $85,000. Catherine watched the notifications pour in, not with the triumphant thrill of a successful deal, but with a quiet, humbling sense of awe. Each donation, whether $5 or $500, was a small act of faith from a complete stranger. It was a collective belief in a father's love, and a testament to the power of a single, honestly told story. She felt the immense weight of that trust settle on her shoulders, a responsibility far greater than any financial portfolio she had ever managed. The digital victory was complete, but she knew the real work, the tangible act of building a new life from these pixels of hope, had only just begun. The drive to Queens was a journey across more than just a bridge. It was a passage into a different world. Gone were the towering steel and glass monoliths of Manhattan, replaced by rows of modest brick houses and the quiet dignity of tree-lined streets. In the back seat, Leo and Mia were uncharacteristically silent, their faces pressed against the windows, taking in the strange new landscape with wide, uncertain eyes. Michael sat in the passenger seat, his hands clenched so tightly in his lap, his knuckles were white. He stared straight ahead, his expression a mask of disbelief, as if he expected to wake up at any moment back on a cold sidewalk. For him, this quiet suburban peace was more foreign and intimidating than the harshest city storm. Catherine drove carefully, the silence in the car thick with unspoken hope, a fragile thing that felt as if it could shatter with a single wrong turn. She pulled up in front of a small two-story house with a tidy patch of lawn and a welcoming red door. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it radiated a sense of safety and permanence that felt like a fortress. Catherine turned off the engine and simply handed Michael a set of keys. He stared at them in his palm as if they were a foreign object. When he finally managed to open the door, the children hesitated for only a second before bursting inside. Their tentative footsteps turned into a joyous exploration as they ran through the empty, sunlit rooms, their laughter echoing off the bare walls. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated happiness, a sound Michael hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. He stood frozen on the threshold, watching his children reclaim a piece of their childhood, and the first of many tears began to trace a path down his weathered cheek. He finally turned to Catherine, his body trembling, his face a raw portrait of gratitude and confusion. The dam of his pride, held together for so long by sheer will, finally broke. "Why?" he asked, his voice a choked whisper that was barely audible over his own ragged breaths. "I don't understand. You don't know us. Why would a stranger do all of this for our family?" Catherine felt her own composure crumble, the professional mask she wore for years dissolving completely as tears welled in her own eyes. She stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. "Because you showed me what a real family is," she confessed, the words tasting of a truth she had long buried. "For years, I measured my life in numbers on a screen. I thought I was saving you, Michael. But the truth is, you and your children saved me from a loneliness I didn't even know how to name." In that shared moment of vulnerability, standing in the doorway of a house built by the kindness of strangers, they were no longer a benefactor and a recipient. They were simply two people who had found an anchor in one another, forming the unlikeliest of families. The transaction was complete, but the connection had just begun. This was a different kind of portfolio. One built not on market trends, but on shared tears, echoing laughter, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest returns come from the investments we make in each other. Sharing stories like this is what keeps that truth alive, and your support in subscribing helps ensure these voices are never silenced, proving that hope can always find a home. The months that followed were a testament to quiet, determined work. With Catherine's guidance, which was less about charity and more about strategic planning, Michael invested the funds with the precision of a man building his own future. He bought a sturdy, used cargo van and, with a can of paint and a steady hand, stenciled the name Sullivan and Sons Hauling on its side. It was more than a business. It was a declaration of his return to the world of the working, a reclamation of his identity. He started small, with junk removal and recycling jobs, his reputation for honesty and hard work spreading through the borough. The children, meanwhile, blossomed. Enrolled in the local elementary school, they shed the weary caution of the streets, replacing it with the simple joys of scraped knees, classroom art projects, and the unwavering certainty of a warm bed to return to each night. Their home was no longer just a structure, it was a sanctuary filled with the scent of dinner cooking and the sound of laughter. Catherine's transformation was just as profound, though far quieter. She didn't announce her departure from Wall Street with a dramatic flourish. She simply executed it like her final, most important trade. She resigned from her position, liquidating a life built on abstract numbers to fund one grounded in tangible impact. She established a foundation, not a sprawling bureaucratic entity, but a lean, agile organization designed to provide families on the brink with the same strategic hand-up she had given Michael. Her new office wasn't a glass tower overlooking the city, but a modest space in Queens filled with whiteboards, mapping out pathways from homelessness to stability. She had discovered a new kind of portfolio, one whose value wasn't measured in market fluctuations, but in the number of families brought back from the edge, proving that the most valuable investment one could ever make was in the resilience of the human spirit. 2 years later, the backyard of the house in Queens was filled with sunlight and the sound of children's laughter. It was Mia's 7th birthday, and the air smelled of grilled hot dogs and freshly cut grass. Michael, no longer haunted by the past, stood confidently at the grill, sharing a joke with a neighbor. Leo, now a boisterous 9-year-old, chased his new school friends around the lawn. And there, sitting at a picnic table helping Mia open her presents, was Catherine. She was no longer a distant benefactor, but an irreplaceable part of their lives, known simply as Aunt Catherine. Dressed in a simple sundress, she looked more at peace than she ever had in a designer suit. Mia handed her a small, clumsily wrapped gift, a handmade bracelet of colorful plastic beads. As Catherine fastened it around her wrist, she knew this simple, imperfect circle was worth more than all the diamonds she had ever owned. Later that evening, driving back toward the city, Catherine's route took her past the familiar stretch of the Upper East Side. The bistro still glowed with the same exclusive warmth, its patrons cocooned in their bubble of privilege. As she stopped at a light, she saw them. A young mother with a toddler huddled in a doorway, trying to shield the child from a sudden downpour. For a fleeting moment, the image was a ghost of her past, a painful echo. But this time, she was not the woman staring helplessly from behind the glass. She was the woman who knew what to do. With a calm and certain smile, she pulled the car over. Her journey had taught her that empathy was not a feeling, but an action. A bridge built one person at a time. It's a reminder that every story of hope begins with a single choice. And by subscribing, you help us continue to share them, ensuring the cycle of compassion never ends.